Welcome back to Build a Mobile App in 2 Hours. In this session, we're going to bootstrap the Planet images. To bootstrap the Planet images, there are a number of steps that are required. First, we'll need to update our entities to make sure there's a place to hold the images. Then we'll copy the old bootstrap that bootstrapped the planet's data as far as its name and description. We'll change that bootstrap's logic to be able to use the RESTful service and import the images that we need. Then we'll create a new timer to be able to call the bootstrap so that it can get the images and we can update the entities. The timers will actually run after they've been published, so we'll publish and then we'll go ahead and wait. While we're waiting for that to publish and get the data, we should make an update to our UI. Our stacked card uses the default local image of Mars, and we should go in and change that list to be able to use the current image that's being pulled back from the planets. And since all of that is synchronized to local storage on the device, we'll have to make sure we don't forget to synchronize to local storage. So there is a fairly interesting piece of logic that will help us make sure that our planets sync to the images from the RESTful service, and then we'll get nice images inside of our app. So a good bit of work to do. Let's go ahead and get started. To bootstrap the Planet images from the RESTful service, we need to update our entity. So if we go to the planet and we right-click, we can add an attribute, which will be image. And by default, in the properties, we can see that the image is expected to be binary data. So we now have a place for the image in our planet. We also need one in the local planet, because that's where it will be synchronized. So we could add it here. We can also take a shortcut and delete the local planet, and then just add an entity from the database, and we'll duplicate the planet. And we'll grab the image and all of the other attributes, and we'll add that. So now we have our planet and local planet. The entities are ready to be able to handle the image. So in our logic, we have the bootstrap planets. Let's copy our bootstrap planets. This helped us get all the textual information inside the database, and in the server action, we'll go ahead and paste that. So now we have bootstrap planet 2. Let's change this to bootstrap planet images. And as we're bootstrapping the planet images, here we had a planet record. We're not going to need that planet record because we're going to be using the planets that we find. So in Bootstrap Planet Images, it goes out and gets the planets, checks if the list is empty, and then would use the Excel spreadsheet. Well, we know the list won't be empty. We already have some planets there. And it won't be the end, so let's remove that. We're not going to use the Excel spreadsheet. So at this point, all we really need to do is grab the planet images and call the RESTful service. So we'll have our list of planets, we'll have the list of planet images from the RESTful service, but one of the things we're missing here is we're going to be able to loop over, and we're not going to be looping over rows in the Excel spreadsheet. We'll loop over the planet list. And for each planet, we want to give it one of the images. So when we start, we'll have one of the images, but we're going to need a counter to have to move through the images so we know which ones we've used. So to do that, we'll add a local variable to our bootstrap, and we'll call it the image counter. And it was automatically set to integer, which is good. And we'll set an assign, and we'll use the assign to initialize the counter. And when we initialize the counter, we're really going to be taking the image counter variable and setting it to 0. So now we've got the image counter initialized. We're going to be looping over the planets. We can assign the planet record and change it. So I'm going to move this out to give us plenty of room. And I'll move the create planet out as well. Now, once we get into the planet, what we'd like to do is check the planet image list and see if there's a good planet in there. So we'll put an if here, and we're going to check if the image is empty. And we can check whether the image is empty by checking the condition. And here we can see that it doesn't see the get planet images. So that means there must be something wrong with our loop. And what you can notice is, although I put it on the line, it wasn't really on the line. And that happens sometimes. So we'll put it back on the line, and when the line highlights blue and we see the arrow, we know it's really there. So now if we open the image empty, now we can see our get planet images and our get planet. So I'm going to open the get planet images, see the response, check the data, look at the children, and then there's a current after the children. So I'm just going to look up to the children, and if I use current, then I'm not really going to be able to change it with the counter. So the children is an array. Current would have been the one we're working on, but we're going to control the array, and we're going to control the array with our image counter. And then when I close that, if I use the dot, the look ahead will say, given the children, I'll take the data. And in the data, I'd like to be able to see the preview. And in the preview, I'd like the images, and I'd like to know if it's empty. So now we're going to get a Boolean back. And I'm going to use another assign, and I'm going to put it above the is it image empty. And in this case, I'm going to say move to the next image. And we're going to move to the next image when the image is empty. So I'm going to move up, and when it's true, it will do that. And then I'm going to move it right back down to the image empty to create a little loop here. So to make this a little bit cleaner, I'm going to get rid of, I'm just going to say move to next image. And in this case, we're going to take the image counter and we're going to make it equal to the image counter plus 1. So if we look at the image and the image is empty, then we'll just move to the next image. We'll come back and check it again. So we'll keep doing this until we find a good image. And once we find a good image, we want to use one of the utilities that came with the template called getSquareImage. So getSquareImage I will place right in here. And getSquareImage wants a URL and the size of the square for the image. So the size of the square will be a 500 pixel square. And to be able to get the URL, I want to steal what we did inside of is the image empty. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to close it, and we'll go back to the URL, and I'm going to set the URL in the expression editor here and paste it. So in this particular case, I'm still going to go to the children, find the data preview, and when I get to the images, I don't actually care if they're empty. I'm going to use the image, and I'm going to use the current image, and I'm going to look for its source, and I'm going to look for its URL. So we'll click Done, and now it's going to attempt to square the image that it's given. So I need another if test to figure out whether that was successful or not, and I'm going to move the arrow up to the if test. And here in the if test, we're going to check whether getSquareImage succeeded or not. So this returns a Boolean, and if it was successful, then we're going to move it to true, and we're going to assign the planet to do the update. If it wasn't, then we're going to move it to the next image again and let it go through what we've created here now is another little ad hoc loop. So I'm going to move this over to kind of square things up. And now when we look at the assigned planet record, we were using the records to be able to do this. We don't need the record anymore because of the way we're doing things, so I'm going to delete that. And if I use Control D, I can delete them all relatively quickly. So here what I really want to do is, now that we know we have a good image, I'd like to use my Get Planets, go to the current planet, and I'd like to go ahead and set its image. And the good image that we should have at this point is the utility. The Get Square image should give us the square image. So there's the binary, and I'll set the square image. So now that we've set the square image, I don't want to create a planet. What I need to do is go to the Data tab and open the planet, and we're going to steal the Update Planet from our entity actions and place it there. And in this case, we're not using a source of a planet record. We're going to use the source of Get the Current Planet. So everything worked. We got a good image. We were able to update it. And when we go back, we'll still have a good image. And it will slip through again, and we'd end up having all the same images. So I'm going to grab our counter and moving to the next image. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it down here. And this time I'm going to be a little more careful and put it right on the line. It turns blue, and now we can see that we've finished the loop, and this will again increment the counter. So we now have the ability to bootstrap planet images. How do we get this to run? Well, similar to the first one, we needed a timer in the Processes tab to be able to call the bootstrap planets. So let's right-click on that. We'll copy it. We'll paste the timer. And now we have Bootstrap Planets 2, but we really want this to be Bootstrap Planet Images. And then underneath the covers, we want it to call the Bootstrap Planet Images. So to be able to kick this off, we now have to publish it and get it to the server. But before we do that, we reminded ourselves that there's one last thing we need to do. In the Select Planet screen, the image itself was originally set to a local image. So let's now update this, and we'll use the binary data, and we'll grab the image, and in this case it's Get Local Planets, Local Planet Image, and now we'll have the image that's actually going to be dynamic and changing. So we've done all the updates we need. Let's go ahead and publish this to the server. And if we go back to the logic, we have our Bootstrap Planet images, we have the timer, so once all of this gets to the server and it is published, the timer will begin to run, the timer will call our action, and then the action will begin updating the data. It will call the RESTful service, it will get the images back, and if everything goes well, we would expect it to update the data in the planets on the server. So if we come back to our Data tab, one of the things that we can do is in the planets, if we right-click, we're able to view data. And if I ask it to view the data, here I can now see that the image has been added, and every one of these images is different. So it was able to find a new image for every single planet, which is great. Now that we've published this to the server, we also would like to be able to open it in the browser. So we don't want to have to publish it all over again. If we go back to the screen, we can go down to the bottom and say open the home screen in the browser. So we've got our PlanetHopper updated. We'll log in. Now before we go in and try to see the planets, one other thing we have to remember is that the planet images are now on the server. We need to log out, and I will log back in so that we can create the synchronization that will cause the images to come down to the local storage device. So now that I've logged in, it should be working on the synchronization, and it could take a little while, but the good news is we'll click on the new event. I will set up test 1, we'll pick some dates, and we'll say continue to select planets. And there we have a brand new image. And if we swipe and say that we want that one, third one, and we'll keep selecting back and forth. We selected a number of images, we can ask to book the trip, and we come back to where we need it. So, a lot of work, but we were able to bootstrap the planets, get the images in there by creating a brand new bootstrap, and now we have updated images. So, join me in the next section where we're going to create a trip details screen that will list the ones that we've selected, but to be able to do that, we're going to need to store them in local storage. So join me in the next section where we'll tackle that problem.